All right, folks, welcome back to a very special session or interview for This Week in Photo. Today, I'm lucky enough to have my friend, Mr. Chris MacAskill, also known as Baldy. He's a co-founder of a company called SmugMug. He's moved on to do something completely new, and we're going to talk all about that. It's coming your way next. This is Twitter. All right, so there's been a lot of stuff happening in the online world, or the world of sharing ideas, photos, stories, that sort of thing. And Chris MacAskill is always on the forefront of doing cool stuff like this. And he has joined me today to talk about a little bit about the new thing that he's building and where it came from and its inception and all that good stuff. Chris MacAskill, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good for you to take time out to do this. This is going to be good. I've got a list, as I told you in the green room. I've got a list of questions to ask you.
You're going to grill me.
I'm going to grill you, man. This is on behalf of the This Week in Photo audience, so I have to grill you. Okay, so this is as I alluded to in the tease there. This is all about Cake. Cake is a new service that you built. Before we dive into that, I also mentioned that you are a co-founder of SmugMug. So give me sort of a brief Reader's Digest of the decision to start Cake versus doing something additional in the SmugMug world.
Well, I was at SmugMug for 14 years as the co-founder and kind of the dad of the operation. So we started it when my sons were really young, and they really needed their old dad because I had the money and I had some business expertise and so on. And then it grew up, and you kind of you want your sons to fulfill their dreams. And here they had a high-tech company that they loved, that they could run on their own without venture capital. It was profitable on retained earnings and all that. So I thought big success. And most of the advice that I got was get out of the way.
Leave us alone.
Dads hang around too long.
Yeah.
And they get annoying.
Yeah. So then you moved on. You moved out of the nest to do something else, and that new thing is Cake, right? Yeah. So first of all, before we dive into Cake, where did the name come from? I'm really curious. Cake.
You know, it came from Sarah Blakely, of all people. She founded Spanx. So she was a fax door-to-door saleswoman who had failed the LSA, whatever the law exam is that you have to be a lawyer, a couple times.
Yeah.
And she dreamed of being an entrepreneur. So she came up with the idea of Spanx to help women look better. And she came across research in names that said consumers like strong A and K sounds. So she just named it SPANK and put an X on the end. And I thought, And I'd been looking for names it's a terrible thing to try to look for names. And I was envious of names like Slack and Apple and so on that were simple and positive. And so I picked up a children's rhyming book and started looking through them. And I came across Cake and didn't dare hope. But I went to cake.com, and the URL was not in use. Somebody's owned it for 20 years but never used it. And I was able to get cake.co, and I even got the Twitter handle @cake, if you can imagine.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And then we thought, who doesn't love cake?
Wow. Yeah. There's so many different things that you can do with that, right? Let them eat cake.
Yeah. Have a slice of cake.
Cake is sweet, all that cool stuff. Well, let's talk about Cake, right? So what is Cake? You and I had a conversation a couple days ago and kind of talked a little bit about it. I want to rehash that a little bit because you had a really good explanation about the positioning of the service. So for the people that may not have heard of Cake at all, what's your elevator pitch for it?
It's just a place to have great conversations online. They're hard to have online now. They're getting harder over the last 3 years. If you just go on Twitter and people are screaming at each other and the world is too divided and we don't get to talk to each other much. And we thought we had at least a partial solution to that.
Yeah. So then the question becomes, and people that are watching this will say, okay, great conversations. We have Facebook, for better or for worse. We have Twitter. We have any number of social networks where we can have conversations and ongoing dialogues with friends and family, customers, prospects, that sort of thing. What makes Cake different compared to those other guys?
Well, first off, you follow your interests instead of following people. So on Facebook, you follow people, your uncle, because you want to keep up with the cousins and your brothers and sisters and so on, friends. And the problem is when you follow people, it's great for family-oriented things and showing baby pics and so on. But when your uncle wants to talk about his extreme political views, it's not as fun. You can't unsee it and so on.
Right.
And anyway, we all have interests that you can't really talk about with your friends and family because it's a specialized interest. You want to be an Ironman triathlon and your mom doesn't care about Ironmans and you don't want to bore her. So we all have these specialty interests, and that's what Cake is about. It's about following those interests and talking about them. So it's not, I don't think it's really competitive to Facebook. It's something different.
Yeah. And then when you niche down a little bit and you say it's something different, the nuts and bolts of it, I mean, people can go sign up for an account, but the nuts and bolts of the differences between, say, a Facebook group conversation versus a Cake discussion. Take me through how that works. Like, what are the two differences between having conversations on either platform?
So in a Facebook group, whoever the administrator is, they choose a topic, and it could be Crohn's disease or something, some health topic or whatever it is. It's usually a fairly general topic, and then you join that group and you try to stick to that topic. And if a new topic comes up, you form a new group because that group isn't really set up to talk about school shootings or something like that.
Yeah.
Cake is structured much more like Medium is, which has been quite successful for Medium. When you write an essay on Medium, you write the essay and then you pick between as many as five topics. And you can pick Crohn's disease and things related to it, and immune system diseases, things like that. And then you follow those topics. You get alerts for those topics when something new comes in, and you just have to see those interests. But they can be user created. So when you create a post on Cake, for example, and you're selecting topics the same way you would on Medium, you're typing in a topic, Crohn's disease, and it auto-completes for you. And you pick that one, and you type in another one, it auto-completes, like health, and you pick that one. And then you want a specific one, like a specific bacterial, I don't know what. And you don't see it there, so you make it up. And that's like a hashtag so that it can be dynamic and move. When Sony comes out with a new camera model, you can type in that camera model and be the first one to set that topic up. Then other people can follow that topic. And you get this really concentrated topic just about that camera model, which isn't the kind of conversations you have on someplace like Facebook.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, the other piece where my brain goes with this is, okay, so we've got those kinds of discussions on a platform like, say, Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, whatever, right? So there's a threaded discussion, much more focused on the Cake platform. What is is Cake dedicated? Like, obviously, we're on This Week in Photo, right? So is Cake, and you have your DNA is in photography.
It sure
so
is.
Is Cake designed specifically for photographers? In other words, is it image? Yeah, there you go. Is it image centric? Or can anyone get on there, say you're baking cakes and you want to get on there and talk about cakes? Can those people enjoy it as well?
Yeah, so I think one of the strengths and the weaknesses, everybody's strength becomes their weakness, so the saying goes, and the same with companies and so on. The strength and the weakness is it's broad. So you can talk about a lot of things like Crohn's disease or the Sony A7, camera.
Right.
But people want really good signal to noise. So the way you handle that is you pick specific topics to follow, and then you only see that. You may not like politics, and you may just, you want to follow Sony and photography and landscape, but you don't care maybe about wedding photography or something like that. You can do all that, tailor your feed with the topics that you follow. But photography is probably not your only interest. Some photographers are also interested in some form of art, or they may be bread making. It could be triathlon, health. We all have lots of interests. And this way you can follow whatever your interests are. It's broad enough that it's fascinating, and you can follow your interests wherever they lead.
Yeah. And I like looking at it, it feels really clean and elegant, and it's almost the antithesis of a Facebook kind of experience where you don't know what's going on at any given moment. You don't know who's seeing your posts and all that. It feels much more calm, I think is the good word for it. Is that by design?
Well, I think of it as a kind of single purpose. So this is just my opinion, but looking at Google Apps, a lot of the apps are pretty single purpose, like Google Maps, and is different from Google Search, is different from Google Hangouts, and so on. But with Facebook, it's all one big mashup, one big app. So you get your news that way, you get groups that way, you can sell things that way. I mean, it's just, everything right there on the page. It's like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I want to jump forward. I want to go backwards, then I want to jump forward. I want to go backwards and talk about the inception, because I know the story about how you started Cake and where the idea came from. The Genesis nugget of it is really interesting.
Yeah, the origin story. Yeah.
Yeah, the origin story. Yeah, and I want to then jump forward into monetization, because that's always the big nugget, right? Like how what's this going to cost me? So how did Cake start? What was the nugget that made you think, you know what, I have something here, I want to start this?
I rode the wrong motorcycle in New Mexico.
Really?
I rode a shiny red BMW street motorcycle in New Mexico just to take 11 days off and have an adventure. And while I was there, it wouldn't clear the speed bumps in the little villages, and it just wasn't the right motorcycle to take. So I dreamed of what would be the right motorcycle, because I also wanted to drive up the Alaska Highway. And I thought, well, there must be a Jeep version of motorcycles that are more rugged for this kind of thing with bigger gas tanks. So when I got back to the US and I started reading about them, I would find out that there were those bikes, but they were loaner bikes to some journalist in Los Angeles who would ride it for 5 days. But I wanted user stories. And I wanted people who actually rode into these countries. And can you ride it all day? Can you go 500 miles without it killing you? Is the seating position comfortable? Does it protect you from the wind? Does it vibrate? All that kind of stuff. Yep. So on a lark, I just bought forum software and a server and called it Adventure Writer. And I started trying to recruit people, just like I'm doing with Cake, to Adventure Writer with this kind of crappy software that comes from the 90s, the only thing that was available. We've all seen forum software.
Yeah.
And it started to grow and grow. And the problem is, I wanted to see ride reports, adventures. I wanted to hear about people's rides through Africa and all the exotic places I didn't get to go and live vicariously. And so we came up with this mantra, pics or it didn't happen. It was at the dawn of digital cameras. This was 17 years ago.
Pics or it didn't happen?
Pics or it didn't happen.
I love that. Yeah, I say that all the time.
So you'd write a paragraph of text, and then you'd show a photo, and then another paragraph of text, another photo, and you could write these tremendous stories of travels around the world. Sometimes they'd last for months or years. And that's what gave rise to the idea of SmugMug, at least from my point of view. And Don, had it kind of another path there. But mine was, you needed a place to store these photos so you could show the pics. And wouldn't you pay $30 a year to do that, to keep your photos safe and everything? Everyone said, no one will pay for anything on the internet. Chris Anderson's out with this book. The only real model is free. And so we fretted and feared, and we only got 5 customers the first month, but we stuck with it. And now there's millions of customers, and a lot of motorcyclists on Adventure Rider, do that. Well, so I got all sidetracked with SmugMug, and I didn't have much time for Adventure Rider other than to enjoy it. And I knew it would fade and die. That's what forums do, right? Because Friendster was out, and Orkut was out, and Jayco, and MySpace, and then surely Facebook and Twitter and Instagram would kill it. And it kept growing and growing, and I had to have a whole array of servers and help trying to keep it up. Now we have almost 2 million unique users a month.
Oh, geez.
It's like, what the heck happened? And BMW named their Jeep-like motorcycle the Adventure, and KTM did the same thing. So how is this even possible? So I began to look into it more and more to just ask myself the question, why are we there and having these kinds of conversations when we're not having them on Facebook? I tried to move it to a Facebook group. It didn't work. I tried to move it to a Reddit subreddit. It didn't work. And through that, we kind of started to understand the dynamics a little bit. And so I waited for 17 years for better software to come along. I thought, surely the cavalry is going to come. It's kind of embarrassing when you think about the state of the internet. If you search for something and it turns up something that comes from what I call a knowledge graph company, like Wikipedia or Google, you end up on this modern, well-organized, fast site. It's great. If it's around a social graph company like Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, they look good and they're fast and well engineered. But if it's around an interest graph company like a forum, there's 100,000 forums out there, and you're trying to find out something about rebuilding the engine of your Porsche. You're not going to find that on Facebook. It's a walled garden anyway. And you're not going to find it on Twitter. You can't have any real long conversations there. Instagram, they're just posting photos. How do you find out that? So as you search for it, you find a forum, and you have to register for that forum, and the rules are different than every other forum, and you don't know the people, and the interface is different, and it's like, whoa. So this model Porsche has an engine rebuild over here, and this model Porsche is on a different forum, and if now I get interested in, I don't know, Ferraris or something, then that's a different forum too.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons we wanted to keep it all together on Cake. So with Cake, we just decided, you know what, we're going to take our learnings from 17 years of frustration and waiting for the cavalry to come. We got 2 designers, 6 engineers, some of the best I've worked with, and we've been working on it for 2.5 years.
That's fantastic. That is fantastic. So then leapfrogging to the future, right? So right now, or looking at the present, we'll take a pit stop in the present, right? So the present, Cake's running, is it in beta now, or is it in invite only status? It's in beta?
It's in beta, invite only, and it's missing 4 big features that we're very close with.
Yeah.
And one that every photographer is going to ask us for that we desperately want to, but we don't have notifications yet, so you don't have to worry about getting bugged for a while.
That's a feature. That's not a bug. That's a feature.
Yeah. You also have to come back and refresh to see if somebody... and so that's one thing. We don't have search yet. We're very close with that, but we don't have a mobile app yet. It's an iOS app. 2 of our engineers are working on an iOS app, and we're using it internally. It looks good, but it's not quite ready for the App Store. And then panel discussions, which no one's ever heard of. I've never talked about outside of the company, except to you and Scott Bourne and a couple others. And
that's coming. You want to reveal that now, or do you want to hold off on it?
So I'll tell you a little bit about the origin story on that. I told you that ride reports were the big thing on Adventure Rider, and it's funny. The internet is the only place on Earth where there's an expectation that anyone can join the conversation, right? And it only takes one person to ruin it. That's not in real life. When you go to somebody's party, it's by invitation. When you go to a professional conference, there's a panel on the stage, and the expectation from the audience is you can clap and you can laugh and support the panel, but we all benefit from listening to the panel. Just let the panelists speak. And so you get these great panels where Walt Mossberg invites Steve Jobs and Bill Gates on a panel in Los Angeles, along with Kara Swisher. And it's epic because these people are so great on the panel, but you don't have that on the internet. So if a congressman posts something on Twitter, then 1,000 people jump in, and you know how that goes.
Yes, we do.
So an interesting thing happened along the way on Adventure Rider. Jesse, a 17-year-old motorcyclist, wrote a Chrome plugin for ride reports to make them better. And I know these guys are not going to install a Chrome plugin, but they did it by the thousands. It's like, whoa, Jesse, what did you write? What is this? And it's that you only have to see the post from the OP, the original poster. So everyone else gets filtered out. And they could be very civil comments, oh, that's an awesome ride. I want to do that someday. What kind of tires are you, using, and all that kind of stuff. But Jesse just found you get better signal to noise if you just hear the original poster. The problem was, if there are many people on the ride, it filters them out too, who are also in the same thread giving updates that you want to hear from. And then you got to hear all the noise. So I thought, that's a panel discussion. Why don't panel discussions work on the internet? Why not? It's sort of like the question we asked back in the SmugMug days. Okay, nobody charges on the internet. It's supposed to be free. Why won't people pay $30 a year? And it turns out they would for a lot of services.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they do a panel? And if you free the panel, make it self-serve, and free it from the need to be in the same place in the same time, like in Los Angeles, like how do you get Steve Jobs and Bill Gates in Los Angeles at the same time?
Yeah.
And free it from having the facility, a stage, a sound system, an audience that has to pay to get there and all that. Who joins the panel then? Is it a group of 6 climbers who are going to make an ascent on the south wall of some Patagonian peak, and they're all going to keep us up to date as they go, and millions of people are going to watch this and react with the emojis that you get on Cake? Is it going to be Michelle Obama calling up Oprah and 6 girls on Women's Day and saying, hey, the 8 of us, let's have a panel on the meaning of Women's Day to people around the world, girls in Beijing and Sydney and Houston, and millions of people would watch that, and they would do the equivalent of clapping and laughing.
Yeah.
And imagine the guests you could have in photography and so on. And the thing is, that's what you do on your show, is you have a panel that's a broadcast. And that format works so well because we all want to hear from you and your guests.
Yeah. And it's the when I think about a metaphor like a panel discussion with the subjects on stage. So you got 4 subjects on stage. And when I think about this, when we were talking about it earlier, I was thinking about kind of like a Comic-Con kind of experience where you have all the stars from some science fiction movie and they come out on stage and you have this giant audience that wants to hear what they have to say because these are their idols up there. This is the question. What happens when you get some knucklehead in the audience that, a heckler, in the audience to the panel that disrupts? Is that possible with this metaphor?
Well, they would have to be able to use the reactions that we have, or kind of like Slack with emojis. How on Slack, for people who've used Slack, it's a lot of fun to all the different emojis you can choose to react to somebody's comment in the Slack channel. So it's like that on Cake too. We've tried to make sure we don't have any emojis that are trolling kind of emojis. So I don't think you can troll them off the site. Now you can go over to Twitter and say, these guys are having a panel on Cake and it's really making me mad because they're pro being able to take photos of people in public and we don't like that, or something like that. It could happen. When you have a street photographer on the panel who's exercising their rights to take photos of people in public, whatever the controversial topic is, they can go do it on another site, but I don't see how they can troll that panel.
That's cool. I mean, that's a huge feature. Well, talk about the composition or the competition and the positioning for Cake. Like in other words, who keeps you as the founder? Who keeps you up at night? Who are you looking at in terms of those are the folks I need to beat? Who is that?
They all do.
Who is it?
They all do, and I wake up a lot at night. So I think the hard thing is getting one of these started, especially when so many of the incumbents, Facebook, Reddit, 100,000 forums, Twitter, Instagram, and so on, they've been around for a long time and they have billions of dollars and thousands of engineers. And it's the cold start problem, the chicken and the egg problem. And especially for us, since we're broad, the chicken and the egg problem wouldn't be so big if it was just concentrated on photography or just motorcycles or something like that. But we've decided it's going to be broad, and we've decided the subjects can be very specific. So you might post on something very specific, and then we need a large audience to get the experts who will also be interested in that too. So that's a big challenge. Reddit, when 2.5 years ago, some people compare us to Reddit a little bit. 2.5 years ago, when we were first starting to raise seed money, people said, "Oh, we don't want to give you money because it's going to turn into Reddit." And nobody wants to fund Reddit. They're about to go out of business. They've gone through a bunch of CEOs and their brand is irreparably tarnished and all of that kind of stuff. Then the founders came back and Sam Altman got on the board and they invested $200 million in it at a $1.8 billion valuation. And now the investors are saying, "Oh, I don't know how you'll ever beat Reddit, because that's become this monster competitor."
Right.
I just think that we're different. I don't think the internet's ever seen panels before. And I think that's going to be the inflection point when we get some really amazing panels.
And I'm going to help with that. Because we're definitely going to do some on This Week in Photo. Okay, so here are the sticky questions, right? So right now the zeitgeist in the news is Facebook, this Cambridge Analytica stuff, and people are starting to realize that they are the product, and Facebook is doing all sorts of machinations with their data to repackage it and selling it. Some of it we knew about, just basic demographic targeting. I knew Facebook knew where I lived. They knew, they know a certain amount of information about me, so therefore they can target ads to me. Of course, that's the give for a free service.
Surveillance capitalism.
Yeah, exactly. Surveillance capitalism. So what do you say to that? Like when you're building something that's not necessarily positioned squarely in that, that genre of company, but when people look at this and they're like, okay, this is another Facebook, and people are gun shy for sharing data and information because for fear of them becoming the product, this is a lead into my question on monetization, by the way. So what do you say to that when people are gun shy of another Facebook popping up?
Yeah, a lot of people are worried about that. And we had to do an awful lot of soul searching and thinking about it. There is this great book called Chaos Monkeys. It's written by a PhD physicist who went to work as a quant on Wall Street, and then he went into Facebook's marketing department. And his stomach sunk when he got into Facebook's marketing department because it turns out what you like doesn't correlate very well with what you buy. So they couldn't target advertising very well. And their mission had to be, how do you do this? Well, we have their true identity, right? And we can buy offline data and correlate it with their true identity. We can buy data from, I don't know, Equifax and everyone else. And it just became this kind of surveillance thing to find out what you buy, because they didn't have the database that Amazon has of what you actually buy. So to get really good targeting for advertisers, that's what they ended up doing.
Yeah.
We don't think we have to do that because we are about these topics: the Sony A7 camera, street photography, off-road motorcycling, Crohn's disease, and so on. So if you're a drug manufacturer or someone like that, you see the topic for Crohn's disease, you have a medication for Crohn's disease, it's in your interest to advertise there. We will have to be advertisement based the same way that Instagram is, so that it's in the flow, so we can offer some pretty good ads, not the cheap, awful blinky ads, because we offer high fidelity, enough space, and so on. But we hope, we can't promise this because we're a small group, but we dream and hope in the future that we'll be able to charge a subscription as an alternative to advertising, so you can turn advertising off, just like YouTube does. So I'm a YouTube Red subscriber.
Me too.
I don't have to see, I don't have to see any pre-roll ads. $10 a month, golden. And I would do the same on Cake too. And I'd do it on Instagram if I had the choice.
I think a lot of people would do that. I mean, for me. Please take my money, right? Because when you, like I said before, when it's a free service, we all know that we're the product. When it's a free service, I'd happily give up a couple dollars a month to have a more premium service to keep the, so that you as a developer can keep adding features and keep the service going. I understand that machine. I think you alluded to in the beginning, back in the early days of the internet, when people were like, you can't monetize anything on the internet, that's faux pas, people will never pay. That's where these freemium services were born of, that mindset. But I think the reality, maybe it's a maturity that the world had to go through, but I think we're at the point now where, okay, a couple dollars, Adobe realized that a couple years ago with Creative Cloud, right? They were like, let's monetize this. People will pay, and look, their market cap is skyrocketing now.
Yeah. It's amazing. That transition they made is amazing.
Yeah, they did a fantastic job. I'm not, I hate paying that fee, but from a marketing standpoint, they did a fantastic job executing on that change.
Well, when we started, there wasn't advertising on Instagram yet, I don't think. And so I thought, what'll happen with Instagram when they start advertising? Because customers would say, no, I'm not going to use it anymore with advertising. As far as I can tell, it's gotten more popular. The advertising hasn't affected it at all. Yeah. So we think, tasteful advertising done well is okay. Some people will live with it. And in order to really get broad acceptance, then I think you have to have that model. For example, on the panel discussions that you're going to have, you're going to want them to be public. So you just give a link and anybody can view them, whether they're a member of Cake or not. And that's what they're going to be. Yeah, that's what they're going to be. So like on Facebook, it's a walled garden. So if they ever do panel discussions, it's a much harder, how do you link to it? You have to be a member of Facebook, and millennials aren't really there anymore, and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, so, I think that's the killer feature. I mean, that is to be able to just have a link and say, hey, we're over here talking about the new Sony A7 III, and I've got, this Sony A7 shooter, I've got a marketing person from Sony, and I've got, insert famous photographer, and we're all chatting here, and you just share that link on the other social networks to drive traffic into the discussion. I think, and then they can share that as well, right? So you can get sort of a viral feel. Yeah, that's fantastic.
That's the plan.
Yeah. So then the monetization strategy going forward will be inline ads a la Instagram. But how far out is that? And how far out are we from coming out of beta and going into full production?
So first of all, the engineering for a good ad engine is really hard, and we don't have the engineers for it. And second off, we're lucky enough to be venture capital funded, so we can endure until we get bigger. Instagram, they must have had, I don't know how, 30 million users or something before they ever started running ads. And we're going to put it off as long as we can.
Love it. See, for some reason I was thinking the whole entity was bootstrapped, but you're venture funded, right? Cool.
Well, I put in some money to start. And then we took a little seed money from a venture capitalist and found out this was harder than we thought it was. And we took some more seed money from a venture capitalist. And here we are. So it's only seed money. It's not really big dollars. We all work out of our homes, and for me, it's a real labor of love. I don't take a salary, and I pay to do this.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about This Week in Photo. Okay, cool. Okay, so let's wind it down. So we talked about the monetization. We talked about the history. The last thing I want to hit on is the future. Right, from a founder standpoint, where do you see all this going? Where do you see Cake in 2020? What does it look like?
The desire to talk to each other is just incredible. It's this phenomenal stream of vortex of, you mentioned Comic-Con, and I went down to Comic-Con to see if I could talk to one of my heroes, Richard Saul-Wurman, and he was giving a panel. I hijacked him after the panel. We had a great conversation, and he's going to let me phone him in his house and talk about panel discussions. And the reason I did it is because he had a 60-minute, he's the founder of TED, and he had a 60 minutes interview after TED was sold to Chris Anderson, and they changed the format into the broadcast format that it is now. It used to be a conversation between people on the stage. It was like This Week in Photo, but in Monterey in front of a live audience. Mm-hmm. And at the end of it, Richard said, the greatest thing in life is a conversation between people. And that really stuck with me, because I thought, oh boy, we all want that. And loneliness is a problem, and we're such social beings and so on. Mm-hmm. And I heard Stuart Butterfield of Slack say, the greatest feature of the internet is still, you have this specific interest and you live in British Columbia, and somebody in Austria has that same interest in this obscure poet. And somebody in Nigeria has the same interest, and you can get talking together. It's just magic.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily magic when they're Russian trolls and things like that. But right. I guess the other thing, from the biggest picture point of view, I used to work for Steve Jobs, and he used to tell me all the time, the difference between the best engineers and the average engineer is like 10 to 1. It's a high dynamic range. You've probably seen tapes of him saying this. You don't see that in dentists. Maybe the best dentist is 2 times better than the average. The best cab driver is 30% better or something like that. And so you got to get those really good engineers, and he did. Well, when it comes to conversation, movie making, things like that, I think the dynamic range is higher. Like with someone like Oprah, probably most people listening here would say Oprah's more than 10 times the conversationalist I am. Mm-hmm. More like several orders of magnitude, maybe a million times. Karen Hutton's online, she'd probably say, yeah, Oprah.
Yeah.
And exactly. But we've shut them out of the internet because of this paradigm of anybody can join the conversation. So Oprah just can't, come in a regular message forum and try to help out with somebody, because everybody's going to pile in and mess the whole conversation up. Yeah. And we're trying to make it so, hey, let's usher in an era where we can hear from these. So in 2020, I think what you're going to see are these amazing panel discussions from people you just dream of hearing about on the internet that you never thought possible. And you get to do it troll free. If that happens, that's my dream. That's why I do this.
Yeah. And then the close of that would be barriers to entry, right? So you got these gigantic Godzilla companies like Facebook and, their baby Godzilla Instagram, and we've got Twitter, and we've got Pinterest and LinkedIn, and on and on and on and on. What happens when they smell the blood in the water and they're like, hey, let's let Chris prove this concept for us, and then we'll throw $1 billion at it and build it, or buy him? Is that a logical outcome?
You really know how to keep me awake at night.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, actually, my inspiration here is Netflix, and because I think Amazon is the hardest company in the world to compete with. I've had experience competing with them before. They're just amazing, mm-hmm. And I heard a podcast the other day with Katie Couric on it, mm-hmm. and Kara Swisher was asking her about what her experience was like at Yahoo. And Katie said, well, the thing is, these tech companies, they understand the technology. They know how to make the pipes. But the storytelling, the alphabet soup that runs through the pipes, they don't understand that at all. So they hire me, pay me a bunch of money, and then they put me in the witness protection program. And she said, I just haven't seen the tech company that can that's good at storytelling and technology, because the storytellers are not technologists and vice versa. And I was thinking to myself, Netflix, because Netflix, they are great storytellers and they're great technologists, and it's kept Amazon at bay, because it doesn't matter what Amazon does with Amazon streaming video. Their huge budgets and their technology and everything, they empower Netflix. It's that Netflix can go get Making a Murder and it's unique content to them. And when your friends say, "Did you watch that Making a Murder?" You can't say, "No, I don't want to pay $8 a month for Netflix." You got to go pay $8 a month for Netflix. Everybody's got to pay. That's how they got 100 million users. So I think these conversations are not commodities. Photographs in some ways can be commoditized a little bit by the social networks. In fact, they're getting the monetization from your photographs, because Instagram is getting rich off running ads against your photographs.
Yes.
And you're not. But the way they do it is you take a beautiful photograph that you spent weeks getting and post-processing, and then you upload it to Facebook because it's easy, and Instagram because it's easy, and Twitter because it's easy, and 500 pixels because it's easy, and SmugMug and so on. And you can do that all in an hour. But if you have a long conversation, a wonderful conversation debating, I don't know, some topic among senators, congressmen, entertainers, photographers, Annie Leibovitz and you, how are you going to export that conversation to Twitter? Or, exporting a conversation is not the same as exporting a photo.
Yeah.
And so I think if you go get those conversations and you're really good at storytelling, so you know what a good story is and you can foster it, then you have great competitive advantage. And so we have to be great storytellers in addition to great technologists, just like Netflix. That's what we dream of being.
It reminds me of the, like they say in Hollywood, when they try to create a 3D version or a virtual version or whatever of a human, and they can never quite get it right. And they call that gap between the digital and actually fooling people the uncanny valley. I think you're hitting on that uncanny valley of tech companies not being able to bridge the storytelling mode away. They can do good at technology. Engineers can do technology in their sleep and build features all day long, but the storytelling piece of it continues to elude them, right?
So people ask, why is my forum thriving, Adventure Writer thriving on software that's still from the 90s? And the answer is we went and got unique content. Mm-hmm. So we have a forum on restoring old bikes, and people put love into those old 1910 Harleys and things like that, and have these long stories that they've told and so on. You can only get those stories there, so you put up with the software and so on. Yeah. And I think no matter how well we engineer Cake, we could do everything just perfectly. It's going to be the content discovery is still going to be the number one thing. And that's what, in my personal opinion, that's what Google Plus was unable to do when they tried to compete against Facebook, was to come up with content that you just had to see on Google Plus.
Yeah.
It was fairly well engineered and so on, but you had to come up with that content. And Twitter's done that because, the president and all kinds of people are only on Twitter. So if you want to read that stuff, you have to go to Twitter.
Yep. Yeah.
So,
and that's where it is. Well, cool. So we've got a question in here in the chat. This one's from Mark Harris. Mark Harris says, if people are only seeing content they want to see, what will Cake's policy be on censorship of, say, nudes? Right?
Yeah. So that's an interesting question. We had our first nude pop up the other day.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. A British photographer from Scotland. She did this. One of the things you can do on Cake are these photo essays, these sort of stories, one right after the other, cascading. I did this. I went to March for Our Lives in Oakland and San Francisco, and then I posted a whole bunch of photos and a photo essay, just like the ride reports on ADV Writer.
Yeah.
And she posted one of a group of women marching topless in Edinburgh over treatment of women. And you know what? It was a public display, topless nudity, and we just decided we were going to go ahead with it. It's one of these things where we're not going to be able to allow porn. We're not going to be able to allow hate speech. We think of ourselves, I know Facebook tries to think of itself as like the phone company, a common carrier where they're not responsible for what you say over the phone lines, but they have to be.
Yeah.
And I think they do that for legal protection reasons. I think we're just going to be honest and fess up, right from the beginning. We're a publisher, but we're a publisher of user-generated content. We're not the ones who generate the content. but we have to promote it and vet it and block it and things like that. When I mentioned these panel discussions, you could imagine people getting up to some pretty awful things in those panels, and we're going to have to say no, just like Reddit has had to say no. That's how they've emerged as popular. Yeah. They've said no to some of those awful subreddits and blocked them. So with nudity, there's going to have to be a line. It's a hard line to draw, especially, for example, I looked into this case of the young Vietnamese girl who was running from napalm and screaming "hot, hot." It's an iconic photo. Mm-hmm. She's completely naked and she's a girl, and Facebook took it down. Their moderation team took it down. Mm-hmm. And the Prime Minister of Norway, I think, was critical of it and said, it's an iconic photo. You got to put it back up there. But half the world, I mean, how do you make that decision if you're Facebook? Do people in Arab countries think that that's an okay photo to post? Yeah. It's just a really hard call to make. And now there are laws like in Germany and Canada against hate speech. You have to take hate speech down, but even their Supreme Court justices can't reliably, determine what hate speech is. But we have to do that. Yeah,
well, that's a tough nut to crack, right? The whole basically the censorship part of it. Like what is really, how do you define what hate speech is? What may be hate speech to you may not be hate speech to me, right? Nudity. That's the notorious hard one, right? That goes back to Playboy and Penthouse, and those guys being in court. Even lyrics, censorship of lyrics with 2 Live Crew and those guys. What constitutes offensive lyrics, and if you take that on, how do you as a company that's going to, like, when cake explodes and it's on a meteoric rise, you're going to have all kinds of people in there, especially these days, right? Posting great stuff and not so great stuff. How do you police that? Is it self-policing? Or are you going to have people looking out for keywords, or what do you think?
Well, so this is a really big decision. Reddit has volunteer moderators, and it's the way that it operates, and they're constantly at war with their volunteer moderators, and the moderation is different from subreddit to subreddit. It's very successful and very popular, but it just doesn't feel to me like we're going to get a consistent moderation policy that way, and a really good moderation policy. So we're planning to moderate it internally. We have various different tricks, like a trust score that's assigned to your account that follows you around, so that if you have a lot of violations, we're more likely to look at your stuff. I don't believe YouTube looks at every video and every minute of every video. I think they have a trust score. Yeah. And so they trust you to not, upload. So they're, like they're probably not monitoring this video right now.
Right.
So we'll use all those tricks and do it internally, but we're going to have to come up with our own philosophy, and it's going to be different than Twitter. I can tell you that right now. I'm not being critical of Twitter, but they have a libertarian bent. The founders always did. They called them the free speech party of, and they just lean on the side of free speech really hard. Mm-hmm. And, then I heard Tim Cook the other day in his MSNBC interview. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, we decided we had to be family friendly. Kids are on the App Store, and in the App Store, we had to make our best judgment on what was hate speech and provocative nudity and make it safe for children. And that's what we did. And that's probably the path we're going to follow too.
Yeah, I think that's a smart way to go. Here's a hypothetical, right? So fast forward to, let's take it out of the present, because the present is polarizing. So let's take it let's go into the far future. There's a new president, right? And this president, the cake has matured, and this new president has decided that he or she is going to use cake as their mechanism, much like the current president is using Twitter as his mechanism for communicating to millions of people. How do you moderate that? Like, how do you, this question plagues Twitter, right? Because, how do you moderate it if that actually happens?
Yeah, I'm going to lose more sleep tonight. It'll depend on who the president is. I just, Twitter is so successful compared to anything I've done. It's amazing. And so for me to try to throw any rocks or be critical of it, but I still have to ask ourselves, what would we cake do in some of these circumstances? My understanding is kind of shocking. You can't delete a tweet as a moderator on Twitter. Mm-hmm. You have to delete the account. Oh, wow. We decided that's asking for trouble from the very beginning. We want to be able to hide any tweet. In fact, if you start a conversation on Cake, you're the owner of the conversation. You're the moderator of the conversation. So if somebody posts something you don't like, you can just hide it.
Oh, good.
Just like
okay.
that.
Okay.
The same as on Instagram or Facebook. You just swipe left on the Instagram app and the comment is gone. But on Twitter, you can't do that. And they don't have the ability. So if, some politician writes something that you, in your judgment, you think is racist and so on, you can't hide that. And I just find that hard to, I just don't think we could live with that.
Yeah.
So they've come up with this policy. Well, if you're a head of state or some really big public figure, you can pretty much say what you want. And more power to them. They got the president of the free world on there, and we probably won't have. But it isn't, I can't imagine us following that policy.
Yeah, well, that's good. That'll be interesting. And you have to, obviously, who can predict what's going to? No one could predict would be here right now, right?
Yeah.
So who can predict what's going to happen in the future?
Yeah.
So you just have to be smart and roll with the punches and tack as necessary. Well, good. So there's a couple questions in the chat here. Okay. Up earlier, Craig Colvin was asking. He says this sounds a lot like Reddit. Now, do you agree with that? That Cake is similar to Reddit?
Reddit is probably the closest. Yeah, Reddit is probably the closest. Reddit, I like Reddit, and I spend, full disclosure, I spend 30 minutes a day on Reddit, and
nice.
It's my break, and I just love to go through it. And I love some of the animated GIFs and I love some of the political discussions. There's a lot of things I get into on Reddit, and I really do like it. When we started Cake, we thought Reddit was going to collapse. That's what everybody was saying. It was just about done. They were down to their last engineer and so on. And now, to see them do well, I'm happy for them. I do think their algorithm is quite different, though. On Reddit, it's a broadcast and comment kind of format. Same as on Facebook or something. On Facebook, you have the big banner space. You post your photo, and everybody else is relegated to the comment sections. Yeah. Pretty much the same on Reddit. You post a photo, everybody else is relegated to the comment sections. And the algorithm flushes it all out for freshness so that it's gone that day. You have to post something new the next day. Our structure is a conversation, and you can follow these conversations. So like on Adventure Writer, somebody posted a photo of their 64 Chevy pickup truck with chrome wheels. And the next guy in said, wow, that's an awesome truck. But he gets the same size photo that he can put up there of his 56 Chevy that's red. And he says, but I need those chrome wheels. And a whole conversation ensues. And you can follow that, and it can go on for a long time. Yeah. So on Cake, you could just follow a conversation. You go to your followed tab, and you get all these conversations. And as soon as they're updated, they float to the top. And it's a conversation. Everybody gets equal weight in that conversation.
Love it. Love it. Good. Hey, look, Karen Hutton is in the chat. Hey, Karen Hutton.
How about that?
Karen Hutton has a question. She's got a couple questions. She says, what's the end game for Cake, and how will you know that you've been successful? That's the first part.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Investors they would think about the end game being a successful financial exit. For me, I want to bring some good to the world. I want to make a difference in the world. Yeah. Earlier in my life, I worked for a couple of companies that were so depressing to work at. I worked peripherally with Pixar a little bit because Steve Jobs owned it, and I was head of developer relations for Next, and they were so hard. I mean, we were like next to bankruptcy every year. Yeah. But lo and behold, Next Step became OS 10. And iOS, and the guys went on to do the iPhone and Android and so on from the next company I worked at, General Magic. And General Magic was another one like this, where we had a drawing of the iPhone in 2006 that we demoed to Steve. We invited Steve over. We demoed it to him, and we showed our device that lets you write a little postcard with a pen, and it would go into what we named Cloud. That name stuck. And then it would go down to the next person's device. And Steve came in for his demo, and he looked at it and he said, everybody needs a physical keyboard because of the tactile feedback and all that kind of stuff. And we argued, well, it gives you more screen real estate if you just use a virtual keyboard and use your finger. It's not bad, Steve. You should try it. Oh, I don't like it. There's no tactile feedback, blah, blah. Well, take one home, Steve, and try it. So he was sending telecards back and forth to us in 2006, and we showed him a drawing of the iPhone 6. And he got it in his bones, and he started to like it, and he began to send us telecards saying, yeah, I can live with the virtual keyboard, and I like the extra screen real estate, and so on. But I think you guys made a huge mistake by making applications run on it. Anyway, General Magic was before its time. We didn't have enough battery life. It was too expensive. It was $800. It was too big, and all that kind of stuff. There's now a documentary that's premiering at the Tribeca Film Festival that's listed as one of the top documentaries to see this year on General Magic and all the people that went from there to, and I'm in that film. I'm going back to New York tomorrow to be part of it. And it became this thing that became the iPhone. And Steve turned out to be wrong about the applications. The first iPhone didn't sell too well. And then he said, well, that General Magic device, they did have applications. Let's try that for the iPhone too. And so those were fulfilling in an amazing kind of way. But I want it fulfilling in the kind of way where it turns into a really successful company. And we look back in 2020 and say, wow, did you ever imagine that it would foster all these amazing conversations that weren't possible before, and millions of people would read those? Yep. How did that ever happen? Some of these conversations changed the world. That's what we're looking for. So
I predict that's going to happen. That's going to happen, and I'm going to be there to say, "Hey, I helped. I had some of the first panel discussions."
First panel discussion.
The first panel discussion on This Week in Photo. The second part of Karen's question is: if cake were to leave the legacy you've always dreamed of, what would it be? There's that Karen Hutton. Those questions.
I am a geophysicist by background. I went to college in geophysics, and I was 10 years as a geophysicist. And Guy Kawasaki's book, The Macintosh Way, lured me to Silicon Valley and lured me to working for Next and Steve Jobs and all that. And I've just loved it, the whole time, because you get to do things that just are amazing and change the world. I realize tech has it's getting a bad rap right now with Uber and Facebook. Right. But there's so many great tech companies that are not like that at all. Netflix and so on, that are doing a lot of good in the world. Wikipedia and Google and all that. I want to be one of those, like Netflix, Google, Wikipedia. In fact, I heard Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia, say the other day, when he was asked on NPR how I built this, he was asked, but Jimmy, you're not even a millionaire. And you have the fifth or fourth most trafficked website in the world. And the other guys who have the top three, they're billionaires. How do you feel about that? And he said, well, I feel great about it because it's the most interesting thing I could ever imagine doing in my life. And it isn't about the money, but 500 years from now, people will remember Wikipedia. They may not remember me past my lifetime, but they'll remember Wikipedia as a moment in time that really changed, the way things happen. And I don't know, I just dream of maybe we can make a change, not as dramatic as Wikipedia, maybe. I don't know. Who knows where it goes?
Who knows?
But who knows?
Yeah. All right. Well, good. Okay, here's another question. This is from WorkPix. WorkPix says, okay, so who do you want to avoid being compared to?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, right now, Facebook is a little bit toxic. And so it seems to be getting more toxic all the time.
Yep.
Sort of like Uber was last year. And a lot of customers come in and they won't sign up for Cake until they know our privacy policy and whether we're going to follow them around and do all the surveillance that Facebook is doing. So I probably dread being compared to Facebook more than anybody.
Perfect. All right, and the last question here, it's from Scott Davenport. Scott says, how does Chris see Cake as compared to Cora? Less Q&A and more info sharing?
I love Cora, and you'll see I'm active on Cora. I've always loved Cora, and I'm not that big a contributor to Cora. I have some answers up there that I've put a lot of thought into, but I read a lot in Cora. That's another interest graph company. It's just that it's a Q&A format, which is quite different from our conversational format. I don't think we'll be competitors, but if we ever became what Cora has become, I'd be a happy man.
Nice. Perfect. All right. So I know I'm going to ask a question for the chat that they haven't asked yet. Some people have asked this, but they want to get in there. They want to get in there and start kicking the tires. How do they just go sign up and then invite will come, or do they have to be invited? Are you doing the Google Mail type thing?
So if you go and request an invite, I'll be all over it tonight, and whoever comes in and wants an invite, I'll approve it and say hi. And then by the way, you can reply to that email. It's not a machine sent email. It's me, and I'll respond, and I'll love to hear from you, especially when you've used it for a while and have some feedback and so on. So.
Oh, fantastic. So folks that are watching, go sign up. Chris will see that email come in, and you will approve it. So get in now while he's watching, right? So
tonight, right?
And that's cake.co is the domain, right?
.co. There's no M on it.
Right, cake.co. Well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, man. This has been
Thanks for having me.
Inspirational and exciting. Any final parting thoughts you want to leave to the TWIP audience?
Let's go do this. The hard thing is going to be generating content. That's going to be hard because nobody wants to eat at an empty restaurant. So we need guests.
There you go. That's right.
Post good things, and together we can make this. We can make this great.
Awesome.
So post some stuff. Let's see some photos.
Let's see some photos, folks. TWIP, get in there and represent. So, all right, Chris MacAskill, thank you so much, man.
Great.
We'll see you next time.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, see ya. This is TWIP.